welcome to Searching the Scriptures. This is going to be part number 4 of chapter 3 in the book of Judges, and I'll read verses 1 to 4. Now these are the nations which Jehovah left to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan, only that the generations of the children of Israel might know to teach them war, at the least such as before knew nothing thereof, namely 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon unto the entering in of Hamath. And they were to prove Israel by them, to know whether they would hearken unto the commandments of Jehovah, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. Now, in our last few studies, we've taken a bit of a detour to look more closely at 2 words, to teach, which is Strong's number 3925, them war, Strong's number 4421, found in Judges 3, verse 2. These are practically identical passages because they contain these 2 terms which we've been considering in our last studies and will continue to do so today as well. And I'll read them. Isaiah 2:4 declares, "And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Then we read in Micah 4:3, "And he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Excuse me. We've arrived at this phrase, "and they shall beat their swords into plowshares," found in both these passages, and actually comprised of 3 terms. "And they shall beat" is Strong's number 3807. "Their swords," Strong's number 2719, and "into plowshares," Strong's number 855. These 3 words only appear together in one other passage in Joel 3:10, which we're going to discuss at a later time. But for right now, let's see how God uses these terms individually to see how they appear in the Old Testament. And we'll start with the very first one, "and they shall beat," which is Strong's number 3807. It's found in 17 verses, and it's translated in the following ways: beat, destroyed, beat down, break in pieces, smite, beat in pieces, discomfited, crushed, and stamped. And again, we see, like with so many Hebrew words, this word is quite pregnant with meaning. Let's take a look at some of the ways that God utilizes it. If we go to Leviticus 22, this is a chapter in which God lays down many commands regarding clean and unclean ceremonial laws, among which we find in verse 24 this word, "and they shall beat," which is rendered here in Leviticus 22:24 as "or crushed." "Ye shall not offer unto Jehovah that which is bruised, or crushed, or broken, or cut, neither shall ye make any offering thereof in your land." And we understand by this injunction concerning burnt offerings that God was really stipulating and highlighting an extremely important principle here, namely that the animal that was to be sacrificed had to be physically perfect. In other words, it had to have no external blemishes or marks of any kind, as the verse indicates, bruised, crushed, broken, or cut. Perfection was required, since all of these burnt offerings pointed to the Messiah's sinless perfection, prior to becoming spiritually defiled with the sins of his elect people, as the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, as we read in Revelation 13:8. If we also go to another passage in 1 Peter 1, 18 to 25, God brings this out as well in this passage. 1 Peter 1, 18 to 21. Forasmuch as ye know that ye were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, from your vain conversation or lifestyle, received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood. And we have to keep in mind that blood has to do with life, like we read in Leviticus 17:11. The life of the flesh is in the blood. But with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb, without blemish and without spot, who verily was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times. This happened at the cross, where he was manifested, or he gave a tableau or demonstration of what had taken place from the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you, who by him do believe in God, that raised him up from the dead and gave him glory, that your faith and hope might be in God. Another illustration of this word, Strong's number 3807, and they shall beat, is in Deuteronomy 9:21. And in this verse, it's rendered as, and stamped. And I took your sin, this is Moses who's speaking, the calf which ye had made, and burnt it with fire, and stamped it, and ground it very small, until it was as small as dust. And I cast the dust thereof into the brook that descended out of the mount. Now you'll note the allusion to sin on the part of the Israelites, and spiritually we have to keep in mind that they represent God's elect. Many of them were not saved, but as a whole they represent the elect. And also the word and stamped insinuates the idea of destruction, as we saw in Leviticus 22:24. And this idea of destruction also appears in these next passages as well. If we go to verse 4 of 2 Kings 18:1-4, and this has to do with the faithfulness of good King Hezekiah, as God worked in him to accomplish his will. Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of Jehovah, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places, and brake the images, and cut down the groves, and brake in pieces. That's our word, Strong's 3807. and break in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. Also, if we go to verse 7 of Micah 1, this is a chapter that typifies the destruction of the New Testament churches and denominations for their worship of high places or false doctrines instead of a literal brass serpent. And they came under the wrath of God as of May 21, 1988. And all the graven images thereof shall be beaten to pieces. Thereof shall be beaten to pieces is this Strong's number 3807. And all the hires thereof shall be burned with the fire, and all the idols thereof will I lay desolate. For she gathered it of the hire of an harlot, and they shall return to the hire of an harlot. The next phrase we want to look at is their swords, beat their swords into plowshares. Swords is Strong's number 2719, and plowshares is Strong's number 855. And in some of our previous studies, I made the point that warfare, which is typified, by the sword, is really spiritual in character between two nations. One is the kingdom of God, and the opposing nation is the dominion of Satan. And it was because God plundered Satan's house during the day of salvation to set God's elect free, whom he had redeemed, as I mentioned, from the foundation of the world. However, we have to keep in mind that since all the elect to be saved have been saved, there's no longer that need to plunder the strong man's house. In other words, Satan is the strong man, the house is his kingdom any longer. In other words, the Great Commission was actually fulfilled on May 21, 2011, as we read in Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And right after that, in verse 19, or verse 29, we have that the idea that the sun is darkened and the moon doesn't give her light, and the stars fall from heaven. In other words, indicating that the light of the gospel is no longer shining unto salvation. Well, getting back to the swords being beaten into plowshares, how can we understand this parabolic meaning, since plowshares would of necessity take over the role of swords because of the fact there's no longer any need to plunder Satan's kingdom. And by the way, please don't think that I'm suggesting that we don't need the Bible anymore. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm simply making the point that we have entered into a new time and season, which is this day of judgment. And during this period, we are to focus not on reaching the lost, but rather on feeding God's sheep. And to do that, we most certainly need the Bible as much as we ever did. In light of that, let's look at some ways that God employs this word for plowshares besides Isaiah 2:4, Micah 4:3, and Joel 3:10. The only other passage that remains that contains this word is 1 Samuel 13:20-21. And here the word for plowshare, which is Strong's number 855, is rendered "and his coulter." Kind of the background to this, there was no blacksmith in the area where the Israelites were in Israel for some apparent reason, which I'm not sure of. And so they went to the Philistines to sharpen whatever tool or sword or whatever instrument they had, and that's the background of this verse. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share and his coulter. The coulter is the plowshare, and his axe and his mattock. Yet they had a file for the mattocks and for the coulters and for the forks and for the axes and to sharpen the goads. By the way, there's another word here that is similar to plowshare, and it's his share. Strong's number 4282. I'm going to get to that in just a little bit, but just you might take note of that. And this is the word, and again, this is some kind of another instrument, some type of hoe that they used, and we found here. It's found here in 1 Samuel 13:20, and its root word is 2790, and I'll look at some of these passages here of this root word. If we go to, let's see, Psalm 129 verse 3, this term is used twice in this passage. In fact, well, let me read it. The plowers, this is 2790, plowed, again 2790, upon my back. They made long their furrows. And the word for furrows is Strong's number 4618. And I guess in the Hebrew it's ma'anah. But what's interesting about this is that not only is the English word furrows doubled, actually we don't see it in our King James Bibles, but it's actually doubled. It says, the plowers plowed upon my back, they made long their furrows. Furrows is what it would be if it was translated according to the Hebrew. It's one right after the other. And so immediately we're thinking, this is interesting because why is it being doubled? And when we look at what's happening here spiritually, it is pointing to Christ being under the wrath of God for a number of reasons. One of them, the word for upon my back. The plowers plowed upon my back. They made long their furrows. The word back is Strong's number 1354, and it can refer to the Godhead. In fact, in a passage like Ezekiel 10 that is describing the living creature or God himself, it talks about the backs, plural, of the living creature. Additionally, the root word for furrows, because furrows is a compound word, and it's, remember I said ma'anah? Well, the anah part of it is Strong's number 6031. And we find that, for instance, in a very significant place in Isaiah 53, verses 4 and 7. And it's rendered there as, and afflicted, or, and he was afflicted. So that this word, it dramatically is accentuating the intensity of Christ's spiritual agony in the atonement. We have to keep in mind that Isaiah 53 is really speaking about before the foundation of the world. And so when we take all of these factors together, the fact that the furrows, these long furrows, are doubled, and the plowers plowed upon my back, and the back is a reference to the Godhead. So we see that this is really highlighting Christ's humiliation and the fact that he was bearing sin and that he had to die and that he had to be annihilated for the sins of his people. I'll read Isaiah 53, 4 and 7. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Verse 7, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. And we're reminded of Isaac. When Abraham was told by God to take Isaac and sacrifice him on Mount Moriah, and we don't hear of anything out of Isaac other than the fact that he said, Father, here's the wood and here's the fire, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And wonderfully, Abraham responded, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. Now notice, going back to Psalm 129:3, the plowers plowed upon my back, they made long their furrows. They made long is Strong's number 748, and is the very interesting word because we find it in 1 Kings 8:8 with regard to the side of the Ark of the Covenant. And this has to do with the staves. And it's rendered as, and they drew out the staves. It's also found in Isaiah 53:10 as well. And there it's translated, he shall prolong, in the phrase, he shall prolong his days. Let me read 1 Kings 8:8 first. And they drew out, again, Strong's number 748, the staves, that the end of the staves were seen out in the holy place before the oracle. That is the covenant, this golden box, which was called the Ark of the Covenant or the Ark of the Testimony. And they were not seen without or outside, and there they are unto this day. Then in Isaiah 53:10, yet it pleased Jehovah to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong, again 748, his days, and the pleasure of Jehovah shall prosper in his hand. Now, I mentioned in our last study, and it bears repeating, that the sufferings of Christ are a pattern which true believers who comprise his body on earth at any given time in history are to partake of, even as he did, according to 2 Corinthians 4:8 through 11. And this has always been the case throughout history, but especially in our day, as the believers have never lived in a time when there was no salvation, apart from those first 2,300 days at the beginning of the Great Tribulation. But we didn't even know about it at the time, where virtually nobody was saved. But in terms of the actual beginning of the day of judgment and living in this prolonged day of judgment, we are being severely tested. 2 Corinthians 4:8 through 11, we read there, we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. cast down but not destroyed, always bearing about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our body. For we which live are always delivered unto death for Jesus' sake, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our mortal flesh. Another passage to consider is, and this again has the word 2790 in it. It shall be plowed, 2790, and this is actually quoting Micah 3:12, and it really has to do with the end of the church age. Micah the Morasthite prophesied in the days of Hezekiah king of Judah, and spake to all the people of Judah, saying, Thus saith Jehovah of hosts, Zion shall be plowed like a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain of the house as the high places of a forest. So again, we need to come back to the question at hand. If swords are beaten into plowshares, since the Great Commission has been accomplished, what purpose does the plowshare serve during the day of judgment? Or how can we understand this? And I think if we go back to the New Testament, this might help to shed some light as it relates to the sending forth of the gospel during the day of salvation. We read, for example, and this is going to be Luke 17, 7 through 10, in which God joins two words together, which are actually two different aspects of ministry. One is plowing, and the other is feeding cattle. And we know that plowing has to do with preparing the ground to receive seed. And of course, feeding cattle is nourishing God's people with spiritual food. And this latter objective, the feeding of cattle, also not only was in effect during the day of salvation, but it's also a major plank now that we're in the day of judgment. Again, this is Luke 17, 7 through 10. But which of you having a servant plowing, here the Greek word is 722, the Strong's number, or feeding cattle, which is Strong's number 4165, will say unto him by and by, when he is come from the field, Go and sit down to meat, and will not rather say unto him, Make ready wherewith I may sup, and gird thyself and serve me, till I have eaten and drunken, and afterward thou shalt eat and drink. Doth he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I trow not, or I think not. So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded you, say, We are unprofitable servants. We have done that which was our duty to do. Well, unfortunately, because of time, I won't be able to elaborate on this and how it fits into our current day, so we'll have to pick this up in our next study, Lord willing.
Thank you for joining us today for Searching the Scriptures. Until next time, to God be the glory.